a sketchy image to help us remember the important principles associated with Strep Pneumoniae. And the sketchy image is titled the Alpha Night Tournament. The reason why it's titled the Alpha Night Tournament is because the Streptococcus pneumoniae is alpha hemolytic. So specifically, it is a gram-positive organism. It is catalase negative, and most importantly, it is alpha hemolytic. So this is symbolized by the alpha sign in the green, and turns a green hue. So right over here, the alpha sign in green turns a green hue, and then the bacteria is also encapsulated. So think about the Sir Numero Uno wearing full armor. It looks like this is him, Sir Numero Uno. He is encapsulated in full armor. And that's how you remember that the Streptococcus pneumoniae is encapsulated. It is also optochin sensitive. So think about the knight's chin being somewhat exposed, kind of over here, and that is why the bacteria is optochin sensitive. It is also a lancet-shaped diplococci, so the knight is holding two lances over here, and it symbolizes that it is the bacteria is a diplococci or double cocci that are lancet shaped, and then it is biosoluble. So think about the knight's horse being stuck in the mud, as shown over here. The horse feet being stuck in the mud. So again, the bacteria is encapsulated, optochin sensitive, lancet shaped diplococci, and biosoluble. The Streptococcus pneumoniae can be found in the human upper respiratory tract, and so that's going to be its main reservoir. And so, regarding its transmission, it is going to occur through respiratory droplets. Although the bacteria is not considered to be highly communicable, and it often ends up being colonized in the nasopharynx without causing the disease. But just remember that if it ends up being transmitted, it is through respiratory droplets. So some predisposing factors to being infected by Strep pneumoniae is antecedent influenza or measles infection, the COPD and CHF are other major risk factors, and then alcoholism and asplenia, such as in sickle cell disease. So this will predispose, all these things will predispose to septicemia involving the Streptococcus pneumoniae. And you can remember this by thinking about the knight that has a sickle hanging from the waist. Looks like that's over here. And so once again, remember that the following things predispose an individual to septicemia involving Streptococcus pneumoniae. They include the antecedent influenza or measles infection, COPD, CHF, which stands for congestive heart failure, alcoholism, and asplenia, such as in sickle cell disease. For pathogenesis, the polysaccharide capsule is a major virulence factor. And then you also have the immunoglobulin A protease, and that is symbolized by the knight carrying the shield with the IgA dimer molecule symbol. So the shield here has a dimer symbol that is kind of shaped like the letter H, and it's supposed to represent the IgA dimer. And that helps you to remember that we have an IgA protease involved in the bacteria. also the teichoic acid, and then pneumolysine O, which is a form of hemolysin or cytolysin. The pneumolysine O is going to damage the respiratory epithelium and ultimately inhibit leukocyte respiratory burst and inhibit the classical complement fixation. Regarding diseases, think about the MOPS pneumonic or the MOPS pneumonic that Streptococcus pneumoniae can cause. So, just imagine the knight's squire holding a mop shown over here. And the Streptococcus pneumoniae happens to be the number one cause for each of these following diseases. You remember that by thinking of the fan holding the number one sign. Not sure where that number one sign is, but anyways, let's move on. At the very least, you can imagine the fan holding that number one sign. So, the M in the MOPS mnemonic stands for meningitis in the adults. And then, in this case, the peptidoglycan and the teichoic acids are highly inflammatory in the central nervous system. And then the cerebrospinal fluid will reveal high white blood cell counts, especially neutrophils, and low glucose levels, along with high protein levels. So these are the pathophysiological characteristics and the clinical characteristics behind meningitis caused by Streptococcus pneumoniae. For otitis media, Streptococcus pneumoniae happens to be the number one cause of that in children. And then, of course, pneumonia in adults, especially for adults in their 60s or the sixth decade of life. And this seems to make sense because Streptococcus pneumoniae contains the word pneumonia in there, so that is why it is the number one cause of pneumonia in adults in their 60s. And if an individual presents with such pneumonia, they will present with shaking chills, high fever, lobar consolidation, blood-tinged rusty sputum. And you can remember this blood-tinged rusty sputum by thinking of the knight's chest armor that is containing of rust, or that it is rusted. And then lastly, Streptococcus pneumoniae happens to be the number one cause of sinusitis in children. Let's talk about laboratory diagnosis. So obviously you'll use a gram stain, and it should stain gram positive, and then the polymerase chain reaction of the cerebrospinal fluid to hopefully rule out meningitis. The Quinlan reaction is positive in this case, but it is no longer used, practically speaking, but nevertheless it can still be tested on exams. So be sure to know how the Quinlan reaction works and that it is positive in Streptococcus pneumoniae infection. Basically, it involves the swelling of the capsule when you add a type-specific antiserum. And then you have your latex particle agglutination test, and it will be positive in Streptococcus pneumoniae infection. And this will test for a capsular antigen in the cerebrospinal fluid. And then for treatment, you would want to use macrolides like erythromycin for pneumonia. And you can remember this by thinking of the crow that is perched up here. And you can think about the phrase erythromycin. And so you would use that for treating pneumonia. So remember macrolides like erythromycin. For adult meningitis specifically, it's good to use either a ceftriaxone or cefotaxime. You can think about this by remembering the triax symbol on the flag over here. If erythromycin can be added if the organism or the Streptococcus pneumoniae is penicillin resistant. And then for children with either otitis media or children with otitis media and sinusitis, consider using amoxicillin or erythromycin. Erythromycin if patient has penicillin allergy. And then for prevention, there are vaccines available. So for adults, it is a 23-valent polysaccharide that produces an IgM response. And then for children, it is a 7-valent polysaccharide that produces an IgG response. The way to remember this is to think about the sign indicating that the adults sit in the mezzanine, and children sitting on the ground. And we see the sign over here basically categorizing what type of vaccine adults and children should receive to prevent a possible infection of Streptococcus pneumoniae. So for adults, it produces IgM response. Children produces IgG response. And that should be it for this video, because we're just going to focus on Streptococcus pneumoniae today. In my next video, or in a later video, I hope to create a video about Streptococcus viridans using this same sketchy image over here.